Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author, community leader, advocate, business owner, and sensory-friendly event coordinator, Thomas Wilson. Thomas's work for working in the neurodiverse and mental health fields has gained international recognition, and his work as an advocate has gained governmental recognition. So we're going to be talking to him about everything that he's up to and what he's going to be up to. So Thomas, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me on.
Why don't you start out by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So, again, my name is Thomas R. Wilson. I always add the R in there to differentiate myself from the other 4 billion Thomas Wilsons that there seem to be out there. But like I said, I have worked within the mental health and neurodiverse community for many years now. I also grew up as a kiddo within both of those communities. We didn't know for a long time that I was neurodiverse. I grew up in the early 90s, and that term wasn't used a whole lot back then. I also grew up in the mental health community. I learned real young the value and power in advocacy. I always like to tell people when I was young, I was considered a prodigy. I was told real early in my school years that I was gifted or a genius, all these great things. But like so many people with neurodiversity and mental health needs, once my diagnosis really started kicking in, that kind of changed. I went from being seen as a prodigy, someone who had the IQ of a 30-year-old at a 30, 40-year-old at the age of 8, um, to the problem in the classroom. My teachers didn't know how to work with me. My friends started changing their opinion. I had some good ones, but it was tough. And my school was packed to the brim with people. And really, as a young kiddo, one of the things I learned was there's not a lot of people teaching kids how to actually communicate and express their anger, express their pain, their sorrow, their glee in healthy ways. And so I spent a lot of my time trying to advocate for myself, really struggling in the system, also finding out that there's a lot of flawed programs out there. I'm not here to call anybody out because I know we're all trying to do our best. But I was often deemed too hard to work with or too difficult to understand. And so it wasn't really until I was in high school where I started getting into a program that actually really worked for me. And it was this really beautiful point when I was there for about almost a year. I had a real bad temper flare up. I mean, when I was a kid, a lot of what people taught me was yell, scream, and be angry. That's how you communicate in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people are taught that to this day. Um, but I had a teacher who took me aside after I had a bad rage moment, and I apologized to him. I felt absolutely horrible. And to this day, I believe mental health does not make a personality. It can make things hard, but good people want to do better. And so he took me aside. We started talking about what happened. We started exploring why, and I apologized to him again. And he talked to me, and he said, compared to when you first got here, where you were shy, where you weren't talking to anybody, I would actually take you being angry and expressing that over being just quiet and trying to conform. And so in that moment, I realized what it was to be valued. I also understood like what a good program can do. And so in this program, I learned a lot about myself. I graduated high school, something many people told me I never would. I got into college, something many people never said I would. Um, and then after that, not long after I graduated, I ended up as a reading tutor, working with people who were behind on their reading skills, and it was really awesome. I became one of their favorite reading tutors in the Littleton school system school I was in. Then I ended up at a day program, kind of finding my way through what I wanted to do. And I became the games guy. I would do lots of fun games with the people there. I would explore and help create new activities. And then I ended up in my day job where I've been for about 12 years now, with an organization called Angel Service LLC. And, I was doing really well for a long time, but like so many of us with mental health and neurodiverse needs know, it's a daily dedication, a daily promise to ourselves that we're going to do good and continue the work. And in around 2021, I had a hard reset. And I was like, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want to do to change, to add something new? And so I opened my business, RNH Creative Advocacy, about 2 weeks later at the end of 2021. Didn't really have solid work until about mid 2022, where I served as a moderator on a site helping people re-entering society open their business. I got my first Dungeons and Dragons gig about the end of 2022. And since then, I have been an advocate, I've been a writer, I've been a game master, I've been an event facilitator, a sensory expert, a government advocate, a writer, a youth mentor, all kinds of different roles, more and more than we have time for me to say. But the beauty of it was really taking all of these experiences, taking my love of storytelling, taking my ability to advocate for the community, everything I've learned, and utilizing it into this kind of blur of a past few years, but also this profoundly beautiful community where I can take all my pain, all my worries, and transform it into this wise, healing, and profoundly amazing community.
Okay, well, talk to the listeners about your government advocacy. Tell us, what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I am serving on Colorado's community of practice on accessibility. So I've been helping them serve as a community member and a member of that, helping define what accessibility means within Colorado. The hope is to eventually kind of branch out to other states within that community practice and explore the idea of accessibility. And so, what I mean by accessibility, I know that might be a hot button issue with certain people, but what I really mean by that is making sure all people can access the community. They can thrive, they can go to the store, they can get out of their house, they can access the workplace, they can be their best, most successful self wherever they go. And so I've helped phrase um, some of the phrasing on what accessibility is in documents. I've helped provide insight on how to serve people throughout the state. I've also served on a number of different commissions trying to help, define how we can grow the idea of accessibility. And I know some people don't like that word nowadays, but I think the heart of it is, and I think a lot of people, if we really think of it as just enriching and bettering the lives of our community, it kind of takes away some of that stigma.
Speaking of that, explain to the listeners what sensory-friendly events are.
Absolutely. So I always like to mention concerts when I start this discussion. I think so many of us have been to a great concert or a community concert. They're such great spaces to celebrate music, to celebrate the people around us, to honor the arts and explore how people can express themselves. But at the same time, for a lot of us, there's a lot of different situations when it comes to concerts and a lot of community events where they can be really loud. You can have hundreds to thousands of people there. There's not always a place where people can go if they're sensory overwhelmed or it's just too loud or too jarring. You may pay hundreds of dollars to attend. If you're in the middle of a new area, you may not know who to access or have someone safe and secure to go out to if you're having a problem. If you're having a problem, there may not be a sensory spot where the lighting's low and it's safe to sit there alone. And on top of that, if you are dealing with too much, like too much noise, too many people, all the expenses. It can feel bad and shameful to leave. And then on top of that, if you do leave and you're by yourself, you might need to catch a cab, which might be unsettling, or a lift, and might be worried about how you're going to communicate or find your way home. And so this happens to a lot of people, and it's not just concerts. There's a lot of community events, and there's a lot of spaces that are working to battle this. But when I create a sensory friendly event, what I'm trying to do is take those worries and reduce them and try to make them not necessarily non existent, but make sure people are heard, they're valued. If they're having a sensory space, they know they can, I mean, not a sensory space, a sensory need. They can reach out to me, they can let me know, we can talk about it, they can walk off for a moment, take a deep breath. The storytelling or the event, they know the language is going to be considerate to them. They're not going to necessarily have to worry about their PTSD or maybe even just some certain topics that are too much for them, kind of like a rating system like movies have, PG, R, teen, all that stuff. And on top of that, I also try to provide a space that's a little smaller where people can go, they can learn, they can access their community, they know how to get home, they know who the people are, they can engage and thrive, all while also having a facilitator who's not gonna, well, who's gonna talk to them in a kind, patient tone, who's not gonna shame them for their disability or their need. I know a lot of people don't like disability, I should say lived experience. They're not going to be, they're, if they need help getting home, there's reliable access. The story can help people thrive. There's a lot of complexity. It's kind of hard to break it down quickly, but everything is designed to honor the sensory needs, the noise level, the emotional needs, the cognitive needs, the physical needs. It's going to honor kind of the idea of honor the desire for smaller groups. And it's also going to honor the fact that there are people, we have a long, busy day, we're tired, we're weary, we don't always want to have to add our own stressors, our own experience onto ourselves and feel less than for experiencing that.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
What are some best practice tips for people who want to build a sensory friendly space? And also, what are some best practice tips people can do to help build up the mental health community?
I love that question. So some basic sensory friendly tips are I would make sure that a space is set up so that there's not going to be a ton of loud noise echoing off of walls. I would also encourage and suggest having softer lighting, as well as a room that can be dark and people can go to but still walk through. A lot of people don't always realize that when a space is dark, there are people who just can't see in that darkness. So soft, gentle lights so they can navigate their way out if needed. Additionally, in a sensory friendly environment, we want to make sure chairs, tables, um, walkways and even couches and things are set up in a way so people can navigate easily, but they also have enough distance to be present but separate. And what I mean by that is chairs can be, a foot and a half away from each other, or if there's multiple tables in the space, you set them up so people can walk. It's really important to note just because someone looks like they're physically able to walk their space doesn't mean that they are. There's a lot of different components in that. Another couple sensory aspects are making sure you have sensory toys or soft things people can use and play with. If you're going to have music, make sure the tone and the noise of that are calm. And then a couple other best practices are try to pay attention to the tone and the energy level of the people around you. If they need a space to twirl in a chair, they've got a space to twirl in the chair. If everybody's loud, make sure each person at that table is comfortable with that loudness. And then on top of that, I would also say make sure people are calm and comfortable with you as a facilitator. And that can start by greeting people with a smile, showing general interest in them, engaging their interests in like anime, comics, whatever they like, movies, TV shows, as well as displaying a calm and gentle energy. Sensory friendly events don't work when we, as facilitators, are so energetic or so angry or so sad that people can feel that energy and offset them. And the last thing there, and this is also going to go into mental health, make sure that your people are happy and they're not faking their interest in people or faking wanting to be there. It's so vital for people to be genuine around these communities because so many people can read that so easily. The communities I work with, whether they're neurodiverse or with the mental health community, whatever, it's so easy to tell when people are faking.
Talk about what are the difference between concerts and friendly sensory events.
Um, so, so again, um, one of the major differences between a concert and a sensory friendly event. So I know lots of people love concerts. I love concerts. They are great. They're a great way to access the community. They are a great way to meet new people, to get new events, to seek new experiences. And they're a great way to explore music and creativity. But if like me, often find them loud or jarring, or at a certain point, you don't like being around potentially hundreds or thousands of people. Um, the cost or the experience can be overwhelming. And then you work in the idea that at a certain point, it's just loud, it's overstimulating, and there can be a lot of shame around, I spent hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, on a ticket. There is not always a safe place to go. You can be around a lot of people you may not trust. On top of that, there may not be a good sensory experience. I know there are a lot of concerts that are working on changing this, safe rooms where people can go in the dark and relax and have some cooling air. Even then, you might not be comfortable with that. And if you've gone through, bought food, all of this, and you're still feeling overwhelmed, you may even be in a new area, somewhere you don't know how to get home, or you may be by yourself or with friends and you're not comfortable walking home. So you've got to get a cab and get home, and that's another expense. And so all of these things do not offset the beauty of concerts. Concerts are amazing. They are profound, they are unique and special, but they are also just a lot sometimes. And so one of the main differences is making sure that people at a sensory friendly event have someone to trust through making sure that there is a facilitator who's going to be calm, who understands the complexity of sensory friendly needs, there is an event that's going to be in a smaller venue, or at least a venue that can be set up effectively so that, there's lots of spacing. You're not necessarily on narrow seats, cramped next to people. The lighting might be softer, a little gentler. The noise level is going to be lower. On top of that, you might have less people to interact with. You may have a guaranteed plan to get home if you know where you're going in your community. And additionally, there's also going to be hopefully a space where people can go if they get overwhelmed that has soft lighting, maybe not too dark, because a lot of people don't know that if you just have a dark space, people can't always navigate through that. There's a lot of sensory needs and there's a lot of visual needs that go into that. On top of that, one of the biggest things about a sensory friendly space is the space is set up mindfully. A lot of people assume if you just have a narrow pathway between tables and chairs, that people are automatically going to be able to navigate through that, even if they're not in a wheelchair. And so there's a lot of different physical diagnoses and lived experience that can impede why someone may be able to get through that space effectively. And one of the biggest things is that people are going to understand that their emotional, mental, cognitive, physical, spiritual needs are going to be met effectively and respectfully. And I'm not here to dig on concerts. I love concerts. They are such an important part of our society. But that being said, they're not for everyone. And I would love to see a big change in concerts and in a lot of events. And like I said, a lot are, but smaller venues that can contribute to all of these things are, in my opinion, the future of events.
Okay, talk about the employment first movement. Explain to the listeners what that is.
Absolutely. So the employment first movement is this really great, really important part of so much of the world right now. And what it really means is it's employment for all people, being equitable, being sustainable, and being something where people actually have the work that they want to have. Again, some people have, a negative association with this, but to kind of put it in a gentler term, sometimes it's just making sure that people can thrive at their workplace. This can include accommodations to help people who are working who may have a need for it. It can include employment that understands where a person's going to be at day to day. And it can also very often include pairing people to the best job, whether or not they're neurodiverse, they live with their own mental health, their lived experience, or whatever they may be experiencing. And contrary to a lot of opinions, there are many people within the neurodiverse mental health and many other communities that actively seek care that want to work. They desperately want to work. And unfortunately, the hiring rate for those people is incredibly low. There are many government websites and statistics you can check out. I think it's the Office of Employment has one. I can't remember everything off the top of my head because my brain's a little tired. But I recommend doing research. It's really fascinating, but there's also this beautiful thing about the mental health and neurodiverse community, which in many workers are dedicated, passionate. When they have a job they love, they will stick for it for years. I know many cases where people they didn't work in like a Target or retail, and I know one person who ended up at a company that does satellite work with actual space work, and they've been there for like 12 years, if not more, because they found work that honored them and actually matched what they needed, and they are considered one of the hardest workers there. And it's also a big part of the employment first movement is dedicated to the idea that all people, no matter their lived experience, no matter their diagnosis, whatever you want to call it, deserve to have the work that they want and they deserve to have sustainable work. And I think this is kind of being acknowledged more and more in American society, but it's also something that still needs to grow. And I know a lot of people may say, oh, but they're not going to work hard and or it's not going to work well or they can't sit, so how are they going to do their job? And this is where the equity aspect comes in. And I think this is part of the reason why we're seeing such a big change is that equitable work is the preferred work out there. And it's also the most sustainable work.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that listeners need to be aware of.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be having a few camps and classes coming up. I'm also working in my local area of Colorado. I'm also going to be doing a few new online classes on my website, as well as a few new uh, Dungeons and Dragons games. And I mean, honestly, this year is going to be huge for my business. We've got some projects I can't bring up, but will include the idea of public speaking. I'm also going to be at several conferences in the next few months. In September, I'm going to be at, I believe, Tacticon, Colorado. I'm also going to be at, hopefully, the Autism Walk 2025 in Denver. There are a lot of awesome things. I'll make sure my links are all provided so you can check out all of the awesome things I'm doing. And I will say, I'm also going to be launching my own series of talks on Eventbrite and on Zoom, and potentially on a new platform called Whimsy, which I'm very excited about. That'll break down things like how anime can empower the neurodiverse community, the evolution of neurodiverse representation in anime, and a variety of pop culture work. And I also, here in July, I'm going to be launching a series of talks at Denver Fan Expo 2025, which I'm incredibly excited for. Because that'll be the first time in a few years I'll be doing 4 different presentations for them.
Okay, well, so listeners can keep up with everything that you're up to, throw out your contact info.
Absolutely. You can contact me at my email, which I always realize how hard this is for some people to hear. I didn't realize how difficult it would be until I started saying it on podcast. But my email is ndttrpg@gmail.com. Again, so many of those letters sound the same. And then you can also find my website, which is RNH Creative Advocacy and Storytelling.net. Did not realize how long that would be as a website when I first created it, but I love the site. I will also make sure my link tree is down below. My Patreon, because I do my own art, sensory-friendly art, and D&D inspired supplements on there. And I will make sure every other important link is on there as well.
Absolutely. So close us out with some final thoughts. Maybe if that was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Absolutely. So I do want to say, one of the things that I always like to emphasize is if you are looking for your own neurodiverse care, or you're looking for community resources, or you're trying to get connected with people, feel free to reach out to me. I can hook you up with resources. I have people all across the country I work with. I also would love to encourage you to come to an event. But on top of that, I also want to say I know, like, especially with so much going on in summer and the rest of 2025 and so much going on in the world, I really want to encourage you to take time to honor yourself, to let the flame of your own hope and joy rage on. And on top of that, if you're feeling down and out, or worried or stressed because there is just so much going on in the world, I encourage you to listen to a good story, honor those emotions, and also just reflect on the joy of your life. It may be hard to see, it may be easier on some days than others, but one of the great things about this community and so much more, like the neurodiverse, mental health, and those listening, I'm sure, is hope will always stay alive if you put in the effort and let those embers rage. And we gotta remember is to keep the flames of hope alive, we gotta honor that flame and work to keep it alive. And so I thank you for listening to me ramble and talk, and I hope you enjoyed what I had to say.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. No, you did a great job. And, thank you for joining me. Listeners, please be sure to follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform. For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Thomas, thank you for all that you do. Go get you some rest, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.